Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of Bite Size Bible Lies. Today we are going to be covering Matthew chapter 1 and his reference to Isaiah chapter 7. So let's get straight into it. This is coming right on the heels of the genealogies that we did last time. One thing that I think is really important to remember always with Matthew is that the author of the book of Matthew has a very specific theological goal. The author wants to communicate that Jesus is the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies. He's very concerned with legitimizing Jesus' claim to be the Messiah that we've been waiting for. And to that end, right in here, we're talking about how Mary has become pregnant. Her husband Joseph is like not really sure how to feel about that because if your girlfriend got pregnant and you had never had sex with her, you would have some follow-up questions. And I don't think for the most part that person saying, oh, God did it is usually a very suitable excuse for most of human interaction. So Joseph is understandably a little bit peeved about this. He was trying to divorce her. But then an angel comes and tells him not to worry about it because it was me that knocked up your girlfriend. And then Matthew says this. It says right here, all this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Look, the virgin shall become pregnant and give birth to the son, and they shall name him Emmanuel, which means God with us. So all of this, I guess, was enough for Joseph, and he goes along with it. Now, this reference that Matthew's making to the prophet actually comes out of Isaiah chapter 7. And you know, when I started looking back through the Bible, it quickly developed a pretty easy rule to remind myself why the Bible's for sure not true. And it goes like this. It's super easy. You can do this at home. Pick up the Bible. Anywhere the New Testament talks about a prophecy that's in the Old Testament, go read the prophecy. Because what you'll find is very interesting. What you'll find is that Matthew is so concerned with legitimizing Jesus' claim to the Messiah throne that he sometimes likes to fudge the truth, and I'll show you what I mean. So, right in here, okay, look, the virgin shall become pregnant and give birth to a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel. This is out of the New Revised Standard Version. I just didn't pull it up here on Bible Gateway because their interface is really annoying. But here is Isaiah 7. I'm going to copy it out in its entirety so that we can read it without a bunch of ads in our face. Here's Isaiah 7, and here's the context. Christians love context, right? Okay, right here. In Isaiah 7, what it turns out to be is that this is not a prophecy about the promised Messiah at all. If you go to Isaiah 7, what you'll find is this conversation. So what's going on, the background context is that this is right in the middle of the Syro-Ephraimite War, where two kingdoms, here we go. These two kingdoms, the kingdom of Aram and the kingdom of Israel, wanted to form an alliance with the kingdom of Judah to fight off some bigger, badder foe. And the kingdom of Judah didn't like that very much. And so these two kingdoms besieged Jerusalem and caused a bunch of havoc. And so that's where we're at. So the king is all stressed about that. And Isaiah goes to the king and he says, hey man, I know this is like really stressful. You can go back and read through this yourself if you want. I know this is really stressful, but one of these days, like this is all going to pass. These enemies who are at your door, are gonna, they're gonna, the God's gonna put them into your hands essentially. The head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is the son of Remaliah. And if you do not stand firm in faith, you shall not stand at all. It talks about, that part, I've got a little off track there. So here we come down to the part that we're actually concerned with. So again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, saying, ask a sign of the Lord your God, be it as deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. But Ahaz, this is the king of the kingdom of Judah, which is the southern kingdom of Israel, Ahaz said, I will not ask, I will not put the Lord to the test. Then Isaiah said, Hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary mortals that you weary my God also? I don't really know why he says this. It seems like he's like annoyed that Ahaz isn't like following instructions, but I love this little piece of sass. Okay. He says, Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the young woman is with child and shall bear a son and shall name him Emmanuel. Now, there's a couple of problems with this. If you're really paying attention, what you've noticed is that in this version, this is the NRSV, which is translated from the Hebrew version of, it's translated from Hebrew texts. It says, look, the young woman is with child, and that is in the present tense. It is Isaiah speaking in, let's see, roughly the 8th century BCE, and he says, right now, there is a woman who is with child, and she shall bear a son. They'll name him Emmanuel. He shall eat curds and honey by the time he knows how to refuse the evil and do the good, which is just a weird sort of antiquated way of saying that, like, when this child grows up enough to understand right from wrong. So it says, before the child knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land before whose 2 kings you are in dread will be deserted. The Lord will bring on you and your people and on your ancestral house such days as have not come since the day that Ephraim departed from Judah. So start to finish, this whole thing is all about this particular Syro-Ephraimite war. And very, very noticeably, it's in present tense. Now, I'm not a Hebrew scholar. I've heard arguments kind of on both sides. If you go look in Strong's Concordance, this is the Greek version. So this is definitely in future tense. I was looking in the Hebrew version earlier, and there are some translations that are going to do it both ways. Generally, I would argue that the people who have PhDs and work on these Bible translations know more than I do, and probably had a good reason for putting that in the present tense, where Matthew wants to make it a prophecy about the future and puts it into future tense. The other really significant issue with this is that this word virgin is an interesting one. Now, this is a really central core tenet of the Christian faith, that Mary was a virgin, that Jesus didn't get passed in original sin because he does not have Y chromosomes in his lineage. I'm not really sure exactly, but it's important to the story, right? That that Jesus is born of a virgin, and Matthew tells us this, right? But the problem is that the original text in Hebrew does not say virgin. The word that is used is this word, alma, or I think in context it has the article ha-alma. And again, this guy, me, I am not a Hebrew scholar, but here's things as I understand them. This word alma does not mean virgin. It can mean virgin. It frequently does talk about a person who is a virgin, but it doesn't mean virgin. It means young woman, a young woman or a maiden. This is kind of a fun resource on Bible Hub. I was actually able to look and find out all the usages of this. So it actually lists out every usage of this word within the Hebrew Bible. It counts up within the New American Standard Bible. This word alma is translated as girl 1 time, maid 1 time, maiden 1 time, maidens 3 times, and virgin only once. Guess where? Right here in Isaiah 7. The reason that we all know this verse as virgin, it's not exactly that Matthew chose to translate it that way. What's going on is that during the Second Temple period, which is the time that Jesus was alive and his followers, Second Temple period ended in 70 CE or AD for you Christian people. So during the Second Temple period, very few people in the Levant spoke Hebrew. Most people spoke Aramaic or Koine Greek, or sometimes both. Those were the sort of going languages just of the empire at the time. In around the 3rd century BC, a group of scribes or scholars translated the Hebrew Bible into a work called the Septuagint. So we have very old copies of the Septuagint Bible, the Septuagint Torah, that are Greek translations. And in this particular verse, what happened is that the author of the book of Matthew, most scholars believe, did not speak Hebrew, certainly didn't read Hebrew, and may not have had access to even the original Hebrew text. So he's working from these like Greek manuscripts, or his knowledge of these Greek manuscripts, depending on whether or not he was literate, depending on whether or not he was a big reader. Obviously he's literate because he wrote a book. But in the Septuagint, whenever it came across that word alma, and they had to make a choice about how to translate it, they translated it to this word parthenos. At the time that it was translated, that word, from what I understand, had a semantic range that did include, it was more in line with the Hebrew alma, that it didn't necessarily mean virgin, but then over time, the meaning of that word shifted, and then by Jesus's time, parthenos definitively meant virgin. And so somebody who's reading these scriptures in Koine Greek would have seen parthenos, and they would have assumed that meant virgin. By the way, it's the same root word as like parthenon or parthenogenesis. So all of this that is like, it's made its way forward in that semantic range all the way into our current modern day culture as well. So when Matthew saw this, he said, okay, well, that says a virgin will conceive, and that's something that I can use to tie back into Jesus. And so he included it as a proof that that this Old Testament scripture is supposedly about Jesus. But we can actually debunk that further, because the great thing about going to the source text is that you can read the whole rest of the prophecy. So here's the rest of the prophecy in its entirety. So it talks about, the young woman is with child, shall bear a son, name him Emmanuel. Before he is old enough to know right from wrong, these two kings, their lands will be deserted. Well, guess what? These two lands were sure as hell not deserted during Jesus' time. So unless I'm missing something, I think we can be very confident that this prophecy is not about Jesus. To take it further, on that day the Lord will whistle for the fly that it is at the sources of the streams of Egypt, and the bee that is in the land of Assyria, and they will all come and settle in the steep ravines and the clefts of rocks and all the thorn bushes and all the watering holes. I don't recall there being a huge plague of bees and locusts or flies or whatever during Jesus' time. On that day, the Lord will shave with a razor hired beyond the river with the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the feet, and it will take off the beard as well. I don't recall that in Jesus' story. On that day, one will keep alive a young cow and 2 sheep and will eat curds because of the abundance of milk that they give, for everyone left in the land shall eat curds and honey. Maybe, On that day, every place where there used to be 1,000 vines worth 1,000 shekels of silver will become briars and thorns with bows and arrows, and one will go there. For all the land will be briars and thorns, and as for all the hills that used to be hoed with a hoe, you will not go there for fear of briars and thorns, for they will become a place where cattle are let loose and where sheep tread. Also something that did not come true in Jesus' time. So none of this is about Jesus at all. It is all about some child. I think, I know of at least one semi-scholarly person who thinks that this child was just like a child of the prophet Isaiah. I don't know, and I don't really care, because none of this stuff is about Jesus. What's happened here is that Matthew has gone through the Old Testament and tried to pull out anything at all that sounds even a little bit like Jesus, and possibly maybe even made up the whole virgin birth thing in the first place. I'm really not sure where that comes from, but it's not really associated with messianic prophecies, as far as I'm aware, outside of this one, which is not about Jesus and not about a Messiah at all. And so, as a Christian, probably, like, if you're a Christian watching this, what you're thinking right now is like, well, it's not. Yeah, there was the original prophecy, but see, this is how God works. He does these dual fulfillments, or it's a foreshadowing of things to come. You're expressing an idea that is known as a typology. What you're saying is like, well, this thing looks like Jesus. And so clearly it must have been some breadcrumbs that God dropped along the way. And I suppose you can believe that if you are so inclined to. But for the rest of us, I don't see what point there is in that. First of all, it's doing that is not something that is supernatural in nature. Like, we talk about prophecies because prophecies are supernatural. Like, if you're able to reliably predict the future, we as humans do not have any method by which we know how to do that. And so a legitimate prophecy is, in essence, a proof of the supernatural claim that backs it, right? But there is nothing supernatural required to go back and look through the Bible and find things that look like a thing that you want it to look like. The Bible says that the Messiah will ride on a donkey. I've ridden a donkey. Okay? I'm not the Messiah. Like, you can go back and find anything. There's thousands of words in the Old Testament, right? And I could go back and say, like, well, look, there's this Old Testament story of the Bible where a bunch of dudes had to get circumcised as adults, and then they got murdered, and I got circumcised. And so it's just God, like, laying out his plans, for my life, right? And I hope you can see that that's very silly, and we shouldn't do that. Anyway, that's all I got for this one, so we'll see you in the next one. I missed the stop button.